Our textbook starts by saying between 1870 and 1914, European nations brought much of the world and its people under their control. That is a pretty bold opening statement to begin this section. Within 44 years, European countries controlled most of the world. That had profound implications for world history. This section is called 6-1, the New Imperialism. Who had territories where? We've seen bits and pieces of this history throughout the year. Spain, Portugal, and Britain setting up control colonies in the Americas, Spain controlling the Philippines, Portugal, Spain, and France having footholds in Southeast Asia, the British and French fighting for control of India, and European trading ports were set up along the coasts of Africa. How was it that all of a sudden these various European countries suddenly had the means and then the will to control most of the world? This is the sketch that I use in class that I share with my students. We've talked about two sections at the beginning of the year, the Age of Absolutism and the Age of Enlightenment. Basically changing, this order becomes crashing down. New values and morals are set up with constitutions. But while that is happening, around the year 1750, all of the conditions were right in Europe and then later the Americas for the Industrial Revolution to just rapidly change the way we live our lives. Like from 1750 BC to 1750 AD, I'm getting a little bit better with this pen, life was mostly the same, right? Like your transportation, if you had, in the Western Hemisphere, if you had a horse, you probably live within 20 miles of your home. And like life wasn't just that much different. But beginning in 1750, for a variety of conditions, the way we work changed, the way we travel changed, the way we fight changed, the way we govern ourselves changed. And it's just this incredible, rapid transformation of life that we're still in. I tell my students the 2 years, 1903 is when the Wright brothers first flew that plane at Kitty Hawk and then like crashed it a million times. 1969 is when Neil Armstrong lands on the moon. There are 66 years separating those two events. The way of life changed, and it just gave, at that time, mostly European and then American countries the ability to control so much of the world. So the need for resources really drives this expansion. Our textbook talks about manufacturers wanting access to natural resources such as rubber, petroleum. They also wanted to increase their markets and the number of consumers to whom they could sell their manufactured goods. The European countries here controlled three really large geographic areas, the first of which is Africa. You can see almost every part of Africa is colonized by one of these European countries. First France, and then later Great Britain will take control of India. And then in Southeast Asia, it will be a number of states, including the Netherlands and the Dutch East Indies. And basically, these European countries were factories, and they needed raw materials from Africa, from India, from Australia and Southeast Asia to come into their country so that they could produce these goods and then expand and become more powerful. There are pros and cons to this, and it's one of the touchiest subjects, I think. If my simple example is if I'm in a bar and I have a machine gun and you have a knife, this person's going to win. The Industrial Revolution, resulted in these countries becoming so powerful, and they could subject their will upon other people. Now, there are pros. So, for example, I use the example of railroads expanded in India, and then the means of transportation enhanced life for a variety of people. More goods could be shipped, more goods could be sold, you make more money. Also, new medicine was introduced, which saved lives. So was that a positive for most Indian people? Yes, but there's also terrible rebellions and events that happen in that country too. So is that bad? I struggle to find a right answer for that. So maybe there might be pros here, but a further case study, if you read a book about what happened under King Leopold in Belgium, in the Congo, you can see that country was wrecked by imperialism, and it's still dealing with the consequences of it today. and were living with this history that had terrible consequences. I don't even want to go into what happened, but if you read King Leopold's Soliloquy by Mark Twain, you'll understand that imperialism has a dark, evil face to it as well. What else was driving imperialism at the time? There was competition among European powers. France and Great Britain wanted access to India's market because they were growing more profitable. So there was competition, a will to become more profitable economically. There's a growing sense of nationalism too. We kind of forget this, but this is the time period in the world when there's a sense of belongingness to a nation. Beforehand, you were mostly loyal to your family or your region, but now there's a strong sense of, I'm English or I'm French or later on I'm German, and they wanted to ensure that their nation was more powerful than other nations. There was also a sense of altruism throughout this. We'll see that altruism is the belief or practice and the belief in or practice of disinterested and selfless concern for the well-being of others. We will see missionaries come to other parts of the world spreading their belief, thinking that they're doing the right thing. We'll have merchants who wanted to create favorable economic conditions for laborers in India. We will see teachers come to various parts of Algeria and later on in China and try to spread their belief, spread their culture, because they thought they were doing the right thing. There was also a sense of racial superiority, social Darwinism. This idea, European countries believe that, or rulers of European countries believe that with the new tools from the Industrial Revolution, that they were simply fit to rule over other people. They believed it with their heart. They believed that because they were white, because they had a similar culture or background, that they were just superior, and therefore they had a divine right almost to rule over conquered people. Why didn't other countries, though, fight back against it? There are instances of rebellion against European colonialism, but almost all of the time, the European countries were able to colonize the area. There's a section dealing with new weapons that European countries had, like the machine gun. So they almost always had the upper hand. Again, if I have a shotgun and you have a knife, the person with the shotgun usually wins. Three major parts of the world that were impacted by imperialism. The Ottoman Empire was already in decline for a variety of reasons in 1683. So much of the Middle East here will be carved up among French and British countries. There was weak rulers in India at the time. Mughal Muhammad Shah was a ruler who was very ineffective, and there was already disunity in India, which made it easier for the French and then the British to take over that country. And there was Qing rulers in China that resisted imperialism all the time. There's a story in 1793 of Lord Macartney, who was, I believe, an ambassador to the Qing Empire, and he said, "We'd like to open up your country to trade and to commerce. Would you like to do that?" And China famously says no. And the response is, China is the middle kingdom, middle meaning at the center of the world. And there was this widespread belief amongst Qing rulers that how on earth could a British merchant have anything that I would want or that I would need? China has such a vast and long history. Therefore, China resisted any European influence until it was basically carved open by the 1840s, 50s, 60s by a variety of coalition of countries: Germany, the United States, France, England. And China endures what it calls the century of humiliation because China refused to open up, whereas Japan actually did, but that's a different story. The text concludes with four major changes of what this had again on daily life. New governing ways were imposed upon people. We saw with the Age of Enlightenment fueled the Age of Revolutions and the constitutions and the way we govern ourselves. And these ways were imposed upon other people. Maps changed. European countries grew incredibly profitable from markets across the world too. There was some examples of reciprocal growth, but for the most part, it favored European countries. A monetary economy, the expansion of slavery and indentured servitude was connected, especially in the United States, where there was this explosion of capital and growth, and more businesses, more merchants became profitable at the time. And then there was the social and culture change too. The expansion of, whoops, that's not supposed to say that. Social cultural change, ignore that. Chinese girls learning French Christmas carols. A picture speaks a million words, and we can see that this age of imperialism that we lived through for a long time period, independence movements will mostly come post World War II, brought our world together. Maybe it almost like it forced our world together. Whether that is right, whether that is wrong, there is a million different chapters you could look at with the age of imperialism. You could find good, you could find bad, which is why, again, I always come back to my favorite saying: history is gray.